Hello and welcome to New Wine Tastings, which provides a taste of what New Wineskins is about, which is about building relational bridges through Jesus in contemporary culture. I'm Paul Louis Metzger, the director of the Institute for Cultural Engagement, New Wineskins. Several of the themes we deal with at New Wine pertain to matters of trauma and resilience, faith and science, mental health, disabilities, alternative abilities. And along those lines, I have the privilege today of introducing to you Gordon and Jill Viggiano. I was making sure I had their name right, and I want to do it like with my fingers, like Viggiano. I want to do it, and I think I'm resonating at least with my guests. But you know, I'm not claiming to go to Hollywood anytime soon to do an Italian movie. I have trouble enough with German movies with my last name and all. You would think I could do better, but anyway. We're going to be talking about building bridges of various kinds to experience the recovery and cultivation of deep hope and faith in the face of great loss. Most, if not all people, you, me, are going to experience various forms of dramatic change, suffering, even tragedy in life. How will we respond? How will we recover? And so Jill and Gordon and Jill are going to be sharing from their experience, and it's a powerful story. And we'll be talking about the book here in a minute that Jill authored in light of their experience. And they're going to help us answer this question that we're dealing with. How are we going to recover? I've had the privilege of connecting with the Viggianos on a few occasions over the past several months and learning more about them. And Jill, if at this point you could share the cover of the book, Painful Blessing, A Story of Loss, Recovery, Hope, and Faith. Yeah, I can see the main title very well. And again, Painful Blessing, A Story of Loss, Recovery, Hope, and Faith. The back cover blurb, and I have my copy here with me, it really grabbed me, and I'm sure it's going to grab you. Let me read it to you. The Jill and Gordon Viggiano story. On his 51st birthday, Gordon Viggiano suffered a massive stroke, dramatically changing his life and his family's lives. While he is lost in the dense fog of his stroke, this is at the time of writing, his wife Jill is faced with the terrible reality of caring for her disabled husband, raising their two children, and facing seemingly inevitable financial ruin. The strength of their faith, the strength of their marriage, and the strength of their family are tested to the limits and beyond, as would be true for any of us in such situations. In Painful Blessing, Jill tells the story of devastating loss, hope that comes from the faith that sustains her, finding joy in their new life, and the decision to embrace recovery as both a team sport and a lifetime endeavor. I love that, team sport and a lifetime endeavor. And it really speaks to me, as I'll allude to it maybe later in this episode. The Viggianos are familiar with this, but some of you may know that my son Christopher endured a catastrophic brain injury back in January 2021. And so I long for stories like these. They really help my wife, Mariko, and I, our family, to continue to move forward. It is really a team endeavor, as it is for the Viggianos. So let's get right into it. Jill and Gordon, thank you so much for being with me at New Wine Tastings.
Thanks for having us. It's a delight.
Well, we haven't gone too far in the interview. You'll have to hold off on that, until later.
It's to be a delight.
You hope it'll be a delight working with me. You're just so into hope that, you're hoping that I won't screw this up. So, okay. But thank you. And so yours is a remarkable story of faith, hope, joy, love, and resilience. You write in the epilogue, which wasn't included in this book, but it came after, correct?
Correct.
Is my understanding. So
Correct.
Hopefully there'll be a new edition where that's included, and maybe another chapter or two, second edition. But you say in the epilogue that now, quote unquote, life is different, but good. And I said, I really appreciate the simplicity mixed with complexity of this honest statement. I would assume it has taken a long time. I mean, I don't know, but I would assume it has taken a long time to get to that point of saying and writing such words amidst so many challenges and loss. And I do not want to make light of it in any way. I cannot imagine what it must have been like, what it continues in some ways to be like. But the story does not end there, with what had happened with the loss. As the title and subtitle read, yes, the journey is painful, but there is also blessing. Loss is not the last word. And I would hope for our viewers that they take note of that for their own lives as well. Loss does not have to be the last word. Recovery is the last word here. Please unpack for us, I want to say the Viggianos. Life is different, but good for us. Again, if you would unpack that for us, please.
Well, we had always been very goal-oriented, success-oriented people of action. Gordon was always an entrepreneur. We knew what it was like to have hard things happening. Being an entrepreneur's wife, I always liken it to being on a roller coaster, where he's at the roller coaster with his hands up going faster, faster. I'm just sitting there with my eyes shut, trying not to throw up. That's what it's like being married, for me to be married to an entrepreneur. And I always thought the ups and downs of entrepreneurship were really the test of my mettle. But really what it was the warm up. When the stroke hit, he had no risk factors. It was just one of those struck by lightning events. It just happened. There's no explanation. Spontaneous bilateral carotid artery dissection. So both of his carotid arteries cracked. The only thing we know is he had been at the gym the night before, but so had millions of other people. None of them had a spontaneous carotid artery dissection. It just happened. And his left artery basically exploded and sent many clots up into his head. Luckily, his right one didn't, and that's the reason he's alive today. But the left one threw so many clots, they retrieved 3, but had to leave the rest. So he went from being perfectly fine to being, he had no movement on the right side of his body. He had no ability to speak. He didn't remember language. He would say yes and no, but he didn't know what they meant. He didn't know who we were. He didn't recognize his kids. He had no memory. It's almost incomprehensible to go like that, from being totally on it to being lost. It's like being a newborn baby again. The only thing is you're 51 years old. And it just started us on this path. It took years. I would say it took me a couple of years even to understand what had really happened to us. When it first happened, we just assumed he would recover and everything would be fine. See, we all watch too much television. I've watched House. I've watched all these TV shows, right? This terrible thing happens. They're in a coma. They appear to be dying. They figure out what it is, and they give them the right medication, and they're laughing as they're rolling out of the hospital in their wheelchair. And it all happens in an hour. So you're thinking, okay, why not me? So dealing with the reality of what happened and really understanding what it means and what the implications are. It took me years, I think, to really understand that our old life was gone, and that it was only about moving forward. And that was, it's a very painful experience to have to let go of everything. We'd worked hard. We had all these goals. We'd accomplished a lot of our goals. We were really moving forward. We were really hitting our stride. And we had to say goodbye to all that. Poor Gordon, he was lost. Everything to him was fine. He was living really only in the left side of his brain, which is about now and isn't this nice? And whereas, I like to say both sides of my brain worked fine. So that was my problem. Is in many ways I had to deal with it alone. Even though he was here, he wasn't my partner anymore. So it took a long time to be able to to work through what had happened to us, the fact that nothing was ever going to be the same again, and that we had to move forward because staying where we were was too painful. We had to move forward. So so that's what we did. And we just had to keep working on moving forward and finding the joy in each day. And that, it was hard, but that really saved me through a lot of the process. Every day we would do something as a treat. We would go to coffee, or we would go do something, because we had to celebrate the fact that we survived another day.
Yeah.
That we had worked on recovery, and that, you know,
Yeah.
something good had to happen every day.
There's a lot of wisdom in what you're sharing, Jill, and I thank God for the two of you and your testimony in the midst of great challenges. The testimony to your marriage, testimony to life, to faith and hope and love. Gordon, I want to make sure that if you wish to share here at this juncture, feel free to do so. I don't want to just keep moving forward. Feel free to share if you wish.
Jill knows exactly what to say, not me.
Okay.
I processed it fast enough.
Okay. And what I was just going to say in response, again, there's a lot to reflect upon in what Jill had shared about, and I'm speaking to the viewers now, of their experience. You know, I could imagine, Jill and Gordon, that it wasn't just Gordon who, in a sense, I don't want to use the word, I mean, the only word that comes to my mind is numb. I have often felt numb since Christopher's situation. I wouldn't say it's part of saying numbness, but there's got to be a sense in which, you know, you're just in this time warp, or you're into some kind of, like, it's just, there's a numbness to it. It's like, is this real? I can't imagine, you know, just not really knowing how to function in the face of that trauma. I don't have the right words to do justice to what I heard you share, but even though you were working on both sides of the brain, Jill, there's still a sense in which it's hard to fathom all that, I would assume.
It is. And one of the, when I was writing the book, one of the things I talk about was how everything looked the same. I wore the same clothes. We lived in the same house. To look around, everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. It was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something. It's like everything looks the same and nothing is the same. And it's it is sort of a Twilight Zone feeling. It's you've sucked out of this life, and yet this life visually is still there.
Yeah.
And trying to, and then of course we had kids. Our son was 12 and our daughter was 14, trying to help them at really critical times in their lives. Those are tough ages anyway, and trying to help them navigate through this dramatic change in our lives, and yet try to help them feel somewhat normal. And where nothing is normal anymore. And it was a very, very difficult place to be. And I know it was really hard for the kids. It was really hard for us, for me. Poor Gordon. You know, if people say, "Oh, you must have post-traumatic stress," I'm like, no, he doesn't. I do. He was really lost. And the great thing for Gordon was that he was really lost, but he was really happy. And he knew he wanted to recover. And so that was like a new goal for him. But he didn't understand really what had been lost and what was always going to be gone. He didn't really understand. So my job was to encourage him and not lie to him, but I had to encourage him and help us move forward, because if he gave up, it was over. You know, he had to be my partner in recovery. I had to be his partner in recovery, and the rest, I just kind of had to keep it to myself, because I couldn't bring him down. One thing that we've had in all these years that, you know, we've talked about, done speaking around the country, and we've talked about what's happened. The overwhelming and tragic reports that I get from people who've gone through something similar is that the survivor or the caregiver or both give up. And then there they are, and they're very unhappy, but they're not willing to move past it. Well, I couldn't let that happen. We had to move past it.
Hmm.
So Gordon, I mean, there are still effects from the stroke. I mean, he does things, but I mean, his arms it can move it, but it's not useful. But the most important thing for Gordon was that his cognition is still difficult. Being really able to manipulate language, speak in an orderly fashion. Open-ended questions are almost impossible. But he's come so far, but there are still bumps in our road. But he's come so far. So he probably won't say a lot, but you know,
But I'm thinking,
but I speak enough for both of us, so we are good.
Well, and and I've had the opportunity to interact with Gordon at a couple of events, and so I can't imagine how difficult it must be, but I've really enjoyed those conversations that were very spontaneous, big group gatherings and such. But I think you handled yourself far better than I did. But I just, but I wanted to say too that I remember when one of my grandfathers had strokes, and just the frustration I would see on his face as he couldn't remember my name. You had alluded to that earlier, and if you don't mind me saying, Gordon, I just picked up on that. Just I could tell that was hard for you, even as Jill was sharing that, to not remember names of children or what have you in the early days. Again, I could just pick up on that, and it reminded me of my situation with my grandfather years ago, and I was just a little boy, but I still remember. He's long gone, but I still remember how hard that was for him. And so I'm sure it goes very deep. I'm sure it goes very deep.
yeah, especially the beginning.
Yeah.
So to move further into this, you've already alluded to this a bit, and I've made use of this line for our own family situation. As a pastoral counselor, Tom Shive, says to me, he'll quote from Magnum Force, which I don't know, generally that wouldn't be a good movie for me to make use of in our situation. But I need to de-escalate things, not escalate things. But is Clint Eastwood's character says there, a man's got to know his limitations. What do you make of the importance of knowing one's limitations and experiencing recovery in life, as well as modifying one's expectations? So again, accounting for one's limitations, whether it's with a stroke or other matters that you've had to endure, but also modifying. It doesn't mean reducing per se, but it's coming up with recalibrated expectations for life. I would assume. Again, I'm only thinking of what I know. I don't want to project onto your situation, but okay, again, I'll say it one more time for the viewers. What do you make of the importance of knowing one's limitations and experiencing recovery in life, as well as modifying or recalibrating one's expectations?
Well, I always say Gordon's is a story of recovery. Mine is a story of surrender. And it was not easy. Surrender is not a real popular word in America. But it was about learning my limitations. I had always been very capable. We had both been very capable people. When that happened, everything was so far out of my control. I learned that I had so little control, and I was so limited in what I could do. And at first, you fight it, or I did at least. I kept trying to make plans and trying to figure this out, but it became clear pretty early on that I had no control, and that my limitations were I was so limited in what I could do other than face each day. I always say his is recovery, mine is surrender. Because once I was able to just surrender it all to Jesus and say, this is so much bigger than I am. This is so much bigger than I am. I just have to give it to you. I'll do my best, but I cannot handle this. I can't carry this load. I can't change a thing. I can't do anything. I was very clear on my limitations at that point. So the great thing for us is, because we're Christians, we know that Jesus is standing there with his hands out saying, give it to me. I'm here. Throw me the ball, it's so that it just changed everything for me, being able to really surrender it. It kind of get out of the control, the illusion of control, just let it go, and give it to Jesus, saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever happens, you're the one that's calling the place. It isn't me. And that really helped me. I felt better. It was a huge relief. It was like a huge weight lifted off of my shoulders, because I kept putting it on my shoulders that I had to be the one in control. Yes, I was the one doing the stuff. I was the hands and feet, but I was not the one in control. And ultimately, it was an incredibly freeing thing to be able to just give it up and to say, I will do my best. I will do my absolute best, but the outcome is yours. And to be able to give that to Jesus and rely on that and to truly do it. And sometimes you have to do it more than once a day. Surrender is hard. We are not wired that way. So, yeah, I learned my limitations very early, and acknowledging my limitations, knowing that I've given it to the one who has all the power and all the control. It was very freeing. It was not easy, but once I finally got there, it was very, very freeing. And really everything was better. Everything was better once I had reached that point.
Yeah, that's powerful. And you mentioned before about for Gordon, as you said, Jill, it was moving from loss to recovery, and Jesus building that bridge from loss to recovery. For you, if I think about the subtitle again here, story of loss, recovery, etc. Loss, recovery, hope, and faith. I shouldn't say etc. That there's a sense in which Jesus not only builds the bridge from loss to recovery, but builds the bridge from loss to surrender. And for, as you said, in American culture, that's not a positive, but really that bridge, that's freeing. It's, as you said, freeing, it's liberating, it's life-giving. So it's counterintuitive, it's paradoxical.
Yeah.
But, as Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So that surrender is really life-giving. It's a bridge from loss to surrender. And I think that's so important. Just like you mentioned before, it's not like House or Hollywood, so to speak. The kingdom of heaven operates very differently in terms of time, in terms of victory. It's upside down, and so on and so forth. So again, powerful reflections. What about the matter of expectations? You mentioned with limitations. Any further word on expectations?
So when it came to recovery, we from the very beginning expected full recovery. We were not willing to accept anything else. We were accomplished, goal-oriented, forward-thinking people, and full recovery was our goal. And we set crazy goals for ourselves. We would set timelines. This is what I want to accomplish. This is how long it's going to take me. We just did all that kind of stuff. Of course, we didn't hit any of them, but because we were very focused and we kept these goals in mind, we recovered far more than anyone thought was possible. One situation we had, I want to say, maybe it was a year into the stroke, maybe a year and a half post-stroke. We were very involved up at OHSU, up at Oregon Health Sciences University, and we were asked to come up and do like a little study. And so we were going to be seen by this doctor who had never seen us before. So Gordon was walking. So that was, in fact, I want to say he was even walking without a cane at that point. So it was probably about 18 months. And we walked in and we spoke to the doctor, and the doctor's looking at us very strangely. And he said, I saw your brain scan. He said, I was expecting someone very disabled. So it's like the greatest compliment we ever got.
That's huge. That's huge.
It was huge. And so So the expectations, I surrendered it all to Jesus, but I still held high expectations for us.
Mhm.
Like I said, we were going to do the best we could. The outcome was his, but how we approached each day, we kept structure, and we worked on recovery, and we set goals, and we still really wanted full recovery. And I don't think we accepted the fact that we wouldn't have full recovery. I don't think that was till probably maybe 8, 9 years in. It took us a long time to realize we might be right here.
Hmm.
And the great thing is, because of that, we saw recovery. I say we saw recovery for 10 years.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's quicker in the beginning, and then slowly levels out. But we kept seeing recovery for probably 10 years.
Well, and just with what you're sharing too, in our situation, we talk about meaningful recovery. We're hoping for that. I mean, Christopher hasn't experienced meaningful recovery, but there's hope for that, based on interaction with neurologists, a palliative care specialist whom you've met, Dr. Potter, as well. That's the hope, that's the desire. There's a sense, though, in which, while you can't have full recovery, and you mentioned that Gordon was an entrepreneur, there is a sense in which, I don't mean in any way to be flippant, you are both entrepreneurs today in terms of, life-changing situations and how to be creative in the midst of it. I think, how to be creative in the midst of suffering is a big thing for us. And again, not to be flippant, or to minimize all that you've gone through, but as I hear you both, in terms of the story, and you're hearing the life, so to speak, seeing the life, uh, you know, God has a way, nonetheless, of changing horrific circumstances into amazing, life-giving situations. And I think you get at that in the book. I think that's something that it just kind of comes across clearly to me on this interview, that while one can't receive or experience full recovery always in situations like this, with a stroke, but the kind of meaningful recovery, it's a multiplying effect that no one could expect. And again, I try not to be presumptuous in any way. This is just my perspective. I hate it when people project onto our family, and so I don't want to do that to you. So any thoughts on that before I proceed to the next formal question in my outline?
You know, how we project our lives has actually had huge impact as we went around the country, speaking at different things, because we were very open with what happened. Most people don't want to talk about it, and I get
Mhm.
it. It's not easy to talk about, but we did talk about it, and so many people would come and speak to us afterwards and tell us, they were dealing with really hard things. I mean, it may have been stroke, not usually though, it's usually something else, but people are dealing with hard things. One of the questions we asked ourselves, like when I was in the middle of writing the book, is, God tells us that, God will use all things for good for those who love him. So who was this for? What is the good that could come out of this? And I think the good, one of the many, many goods that have come out of this was that it gave people that we will never see again an opportunity to talk about something that was happening in their lives that they did not feel safe telling anyone else.
Mhm.
And I think that has been one of the real blessings of being open about our story, and being willing to talk about it. Is it has provided a safe space for other people to talk about what's happening for them. But that's always the hard part. It's like, what does this mean? What does this mean for others?
Mhm.
We're going through this. Other people, their lives are going on. And the assumption, of course, is always that everybody else's life is going on swimmingly, which is, it might be true, but we have learned just from our engagement with people that everybody faces something. Everybody faces something. I used to always say, no one's getting out of here alive.
Hey, you're quoting my mentor, Jim Morrison. No one here
That's right.
is out alive. It's one of my favorite songs. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's true. And I think perspective is really important, but that is something that we thought about from the early on was, how is God going to use this for something good? Because in those early years, I could see nothing good, nothing good. So how is this going to happen? It's a promise. He's going, we love God. We know that he's going to use this for something good. What good could possibly come from this?
Mhm.
So it made us start keeping our eyes open for something good. And I can't even remember what you asked me now. I've gotten way off course.
I think you more than answered. And I think, God changes our expectations to be in line with God's expectations. And I think, and you've been getting at that. And I want to build on some of the other things you were just alluding to here as we transition. But again, I thought those were phenomenal answers. As you both know, and as I've said already, with Christopher's catastrophic brain injury, it's been devastating to us. And, I keep functioning, so to speak. Sometimes I don't know how in the world I function. As I said to you before this episode, I've not done as many new wine tastings episodes since January 2021. I've done some, but nowhere near, not even close to what I had done before, because I've been just dealing with trauma and also trying to care for him and his family with my wife. And so, but I was really struck and even encouraged by how the two of you have continued to fight, continue to move forward. And there has been this sense, as it says in the book, Gordon's recovery continues. Now, you said, 10 years, and even with the epilogue, that it's continuing. I don't know if you're saying that it continues even to this day, but I just want to say this for the viewers. In the book, it said it took 4 years to move the fingers on the right hand. 4 years. Again, with Americans' timetable about everything now, drive up window, Speedy, Amazon Prime. I mean, 4 years to move the fingers on the right hand. I mean, my wife said the other day, she was rejoicing that she could get our son's little finger to open up fully. Like, let's have a party. And I'm thinking,
Yep.
I mean, and I rejoice, but it's like, I wasn't trained for this, right? Nor was she, but it's like, it took 4 years to move the fingers on Gordon's right hand. It took 10 years to open the right hand.
10 years to open his hand twice.
Yeah. And now I know you're saying, and Gordon, I don't know if this is true for you, when you do open and you close to shake someone's hand, is there an issue that you might not be able to unclasp?
So I don't do that for everybody. Certain people that know me.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he didn't do it for me. I mean, he let go of my hand immediately. So, but positive change is still happening, Jill writes. All too often, people think there is no hope for recovery if it is not nearly instantaneous.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenon in our culture. How would you encourage people to alter their conception of time as it relates to recovery, whether physical, relational, or spiritual?
That's a great question, because you're right. We are not patient people. And as time goes on, we get less and less patient because everything is more immediate. It's incredible.
And you are go-getters, but you were go-getters, right? So I can imagine that you were just every day, boom, 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 boom.
That's right. That's right. So, it was, we were fortunate in, so Gordon was perfectly healthy. So once he had his stroke, there were no doctors. He didn't need a doctor. He had no illness. So once he got out of the rehab hospital, it was kind of like, well, good luck, because he didn't need a heart doctor. He didn't need a neurologist. He didn't need any doctors. So we were just sort of released into the wild, and we had to just figure it out. So we were incredibly fortunate to have some therapy up at OHSU, so that we had something to work on. But we went like once a month, and then we just worked on it 5 days a week, and we just powered it out. Where was I going with it? Hold on, let me get my thoughts back together. This is the part about turning 63.
And again, just, how would you, just to make sure, how
Oh,
would you encourage
time.
people to alter their
Yeah.
conception of time as relates to recovery, whether physical, relational, or
So,
spiritual?
so we were fortunate to have a neurologist, or his neurosurgeon. The last appointment we had with this neurosurgeon was very helpful because I mean, all Gordon wanted to know was when am I going to be okay? I mean, and he really wouldn't listen to anything other than when am I going to be okay? When am I going to be okay? And the neurosurgeon, he was so sweet. He's like, slow down. He says, I don't know when you're going to get better. He says, but I can tell you this. And these were the key words for us. He says, I don't know when you're going to recover. All I know is those who want it most recover best. And so those were huge words for us at the time. So this is back in 2008, 2009. The prevailing theory was you had 1 year to recover, or at the most 2 years to recover. Well, when we heard that, we're like, a year? You gotta be kidding me. We figured, oh, well, we can't take that long. So then, but a year rolled around and Gordon was still in really bad shape. So but then it's like, okay, the outset 2 years. But Dr. Clark said, those who want it most recover best. So we decided, we want it most. So I don't know how long it's going to take, but we want it most. So we're going to recover best. And it allowed us to just release ourselves from time limits. And whereas that can be hard, again, you're sort of stepping into the abyss because you don't know how long it's going to be. It threw off the limitations. When we started, we thought it can't take that long. But when we realized how long it was going to take, it really helped us to know there were no limitations. So we just had to keep going. And I know we've met a lot of people who give up after like 6 months or a year because it's long. It's long and it's hard and it's boring. It's really repetitive. It's hard to recover. It's repetitive and it's boring. But so that's why you need a team. You have to have a real team approach to it because you need cheerleaders and you need subs, you need people like that. But we just had to change our mindset from I can't believe how long that's going to be to we have as much time as we need. Nothing's gonna stop us. And so we knew too many people who gave up. And the problem then is they're unhappy because of where they are, but they're not willing to do more. So we were okay with not being happy with where we were, but we were always willing to work to get better. But I mean, and I'm not saying that was easy. Those had some really hard times. Sometimes you do kind of want to just give up. It's like, if I just stuck a remote in his hand, he could watch TV today. And that would have been so easy, but then we would have stopped and we just couldn't do that. So we had to really release ourselves from time and limitations too. Our lives on this planet are, X number of years. I'm not going to waste them. I don't want to waste them, at least. I want to do better. So yeah, we just had to put in all of our skills and just keep going and just let go of time. We couldn't measure it like that anymore. We just had to keep doing better.
And just with what you're saying too, that, some will say a year, they might say 2 years. And, we've heard that even with our son's situation. We also know with Dr. Potter's counsel and a couple of neurologists, one in particular, that, there is a relativity to some of this. I mean, there's probabilities, there's predictabilities in terms of general scenarios, but the actualities, it's case by case. And I think attitude comes into play here, as you said, with what the doctor said. I don't know when you'll recover. Perhaps he was saying, or to what extent.
Right.
But those who want it most will heal the best, was the general tenor of that statement. And so I think for all of us, whether it's an emotional, a mental, a relational, a physical challenge, a community challenge, those who want it most heal the best. It takes time. Oftentimes it takes a lot of time, but in the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, as Jill was alluding to, time takes on a different quality, so to speak. It might not be the theory of relativity, but it is the theory of divine relationality. And so I love how the two of you won't let loss be the last word. Whether it's recovery or surrender, what a loss that would be if you allowed loss to have the last word, if you just stuck the remote control in Gordon's hand and just say, go ahead, make my day, watch, uh, uh, but you've traveled, you will travel to share your story with others to help them through loss to recovery, loss to surrender, depending on the situation. You've alluded to it already, but if you could just share one story of the difference it's made to someone and how they've responded, I think that would really be meaningful to our viewers.
Well, one of the things that we've all from the day we met, we went for a walk together. And so we are big walkers, and we have that's been our time to just, none of the stuff of home is going on. You're just outside, even if we're just enjoying the trees or the grass or whatever's going on. We've always been big walkers to just go out and walk. And so when Gordon had a stroke, and he couldn't walk, it was a huge thing for us to get him out of that wheelchair and walking, even if it was with a cane, fine. We needed to get out and get that part of our life back. And I remember we got him out of the wheelchair. He was walking, and we'd walk every evening, usually around 4, 5 o'clock, just go out for a nice walk in our neighborhood and back. And I remember being stopped at the grocery store one day by someone I didn't even know. And she said, I've watched you every day when I come home from work. I see you and your husband out walking, and I heard what happened. And now here you are out walking again. She said, it gives me hope for my own marriage.
Hmm.
And I thought, isn't that something? You never know who it's for, but just walking, holding hands. So Gordon can't really swing his right arm. So when we walk, I hold his hand and I swing his arm for him so he can work on his gait and his balance and really work on his walking. But whoever was driving down the street didn't know that. They thought we were just holding hands. It was very,
Well,
and I did not correct her.
and Gordon, I bet too, though, that with Jill, that's one hand you don't let go of quickly, like you did with me or with others, right? I mean, you're it's one you cherish for life. And so, yeah, that's a powerful story. That's a powerful account. And I think we're often unaware of how, for good or for ill, people are watching our lives, or we're watching other people's lives. And I think it's just all the more needed for us to be heavenly minded of God's gaze upon us, because that's really the ultimate gaze. Is Scripture says, for the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to God, but also how others are watching us. And are we a testimony to Christ? Are we building those bridges from loss to recovery, and also from loss to surrender, in faith, hope, and love? What closing thoughts would you like to share with our viewers regarding recovering and surrendering in terms of faith, hope, and again, love amid loss?
Your life is such a journey. Like I said, none of us are getting out of this alive. We're all going to face difficult things. And I encourage, when we were doing our speaking engagements and whenever I'm talking to people, I really encourage people to examine the foundations of their life now, before something happens. What is your life built on? Do you have a foundation that will hold? Will it hold in the storm? The storm is coming. I promise you, the storm is coming. So I really try to encourage people to examine the foundations of their life, and to get ready. And do they have strong relationships? Is Jesus at the center of their life? If your foundation of your life is your house or your wealth or your incredible good looks or all these things will disappear like that. Now
Yeah.
what are your
Yeah.
foundations? So I really encourage people to examine the foundations of your life. What is your life really built on? Because the storm is coming, and how are you going to weather that storm? Do you have the people in your life that will weather it with you? Do you have a faith that will never leave you? Do you have Do you have an attitude that will help you move forward? All these things, I really encourage people to examine these things before the storm hits.
Hmm. Well, I have to say thank you for just powerful reflections, beautiful reflections, and a beautiful journey together, Gordon and Jill. I also had to thank you for allusions to several of my favorite songs. 5 and 1, 1 and 5, the Doors with Morrison saying, no one here gets out alive. Again, as I said, one of my favorite songs all time. But also some Bob Dylan's songs just came to my mind as you were sharing, like, Are
Yeah.
You Ready to Meet Jesus? Dylan has a song there, or Shelter from the Storm, or
Right.
slow train coming right around the bend. And I think, for all of us, tragedy will hit, or hard times at least will hit at one point or another in our lives. And are we built on shifting sand, sinking sand, or a solid rock? And so that's a good challenge, a good exhortation to me and to our viewers. And I just want to say thank you to Gordon and Jill. And Jill, if you could hold up the book one more time, because it won't show up with my backdrop, but Painful Blessings, a story of loss, recovery, hope, and faith, by Jill Viggiano. And it is the story of Gordon and Jill's life together, looking to Christ, and holding tightly to one another, holding tightly to Christ. And it's a powerful, powerful ongoing story. The book, in a sense, is still being written.
Yes.
And so I just want to thank the Viggianos. I just love saying that name over and over again, Viggiano.
Gotta get the
And
into it.
yeah, so thank you very much. And I'm Paul Louis Metzger, and thanks to our viewers. I look forward to sharing this more broadly. Thank you for joining us for this episode of New Wine Tastings. Blessings to you all, and thank you for your time. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Gordon. All the best.
Thanks.